Shalom, brothers and sisters. So the preparedness for war is at an all-time high, as much as they're trying to dumb it down and say everything is fine, don't stress, just chill out and watch Netflix. Multiple countries in Europe are not just preparing for war, but are preparing their citizenry for war, are looking at conscription of their young people to get them trained up in case of war, and even the other civilians to know how to use weapons. They're preparing booklets in multiple countries to prepare for war. In this climate where everything is preparedness for war, do you really think it's, how can I say, sane to not be thinking that it is upon us, that World War III has arrived, that this is the preparation just before the big storm of this war kicks off? Because why is everyone spending so much money preparing if they really didn't want you to worry about the case of war? So I've captured this next segment that I'm going to attach here at the end of me speaking, where you can watch the interview for yourself, where they're talking in France about their preparedness, and then she mentions the multiple other countries in Europe that are also preparing, and this is now. It is a time of wars and rumors of wars, nations against nations, kingdoms against kingdoms, turmoil and upheaval and fear and distress. What is that description of? The time of the very end. Be excited. Jesus is coming for his bride.
Working on a survival guide that they will distribute to households. For more on this story, we can bring in Solange Mouja. Solange, great to see you. Solange, what is the point of this manual? Is it to help the French population in the case of war?
Yeah, it is a tool for the French population to have in the case of an armed conflict. But it's also a tool to use in the case of a natural disaster, cyber attacks, health crises like COVID, a nuclear fallout. It is essential information for the population to have in the case of the what-ifs. So I'm going to take you through what we know about this manual, which is still being finalized by the Prime Minister's office and has not yet been published. Then we'll find out what other nations in Europe are doing as well. And finally, I'll walk you through some of the other booklets that are a normal part of everyday life here in France. So this survival guide, what is in it? Again, we have not received it yet, but it's thought to be between 20 and 30 pages. Its provisional title is France Resilient, or All Resilient, and it is broken up into 3 sections. The first section is about how to protect yourself and protect others. Already there is a government website on that with details like how to survive with a survival backpack, when to flee, when not to. And then the second section of this manual is about emergency communication, what to do if there is an emergency, what TV and radio stations like France Inter to tune into. And how it is important not to use cell phones, for example, to keep lines free for emergencies. What push emergency texts to expect. How to recognize the national air raid siren sounds. Here in France, since World War II, there are sirens that go off in many places at around noon. The monthly test signal lasts for 1 minute and 41 seconds and then stops. It's a bit of an up and down sound. But the real emergency signal is different. It is 3 consecutive blasts, each that last a minute and 41 seconds, which are interspersed by silence. And the all clear warning is 30 seconds of flat sound. You may hear this if you're in France on a Wednesday around noon on the first Wednesday of the month. So this manual is meant to teach everyone these potentially vital bits of information of how to remain as well autonomous for 3 days in the case of a major event.
And what is the third section of this survival manual about, Solange?
Well, it is a recruitment and solidarity section, or about how French people can collectively help, how they can join the military, reserves, or first responder groups. And this is where the timing of the manual's release is really interesting. Its announcement comes on the heels of Emmanuel Macron's March 5th speech about the threat from Russia, the war in Ukraine, and Europe's need to better arm itself. Even if the manual has been in the works for months and you could even argue to different emergency campaigns that already exist, websites as well, and have existed for years. For example, fire drills, intruder drills in French schools, the FR alert system on cell phones. But nonetheless, it is a sign that there is a shift in attitudes in France, a sort of pre-war, prepare ourselves mentality. The government has just announced, for example, that citizens will be able to put savings into an investment fund to finance defense projects. So even if the government says that this manual is about being prepared for all emergency situations, and it is, there is also a bit of a dark cloud over it of we need to be ready just in the case of war.
Now, this manual, Solange, is apparently based on a Swedish pamphlet specifically on what to do in the case of a military conflict.
Yeah, Sweden's pamphlet is specifically about what to do in the case of a military conflict or war. It was actually created in 1987. They redid it a decade later, and then last year distributed it to millions of households. It is also translated in multiple languages. It is also online. You can look at it if you want. France's will be based on this one, allegedly. Sweden isn't the only country that has these just-in-case doomsday manuals. Norway, Denmark, Lithuania, most recently Poland as well, and a number of other European nations have these survival guides. Other nations like Germany, they're working on similar projects. Germany, for example, has announced last year that they're creating an app to list where there are nuclear shelters. Unlike Germany, Switzerland has kept up its bomb shelters. Since the 1960s, under the Swiss defense plan Suisse Réduit, it's required residential buildings, for example, to have these shelters. Municipalities must ensure a spot for every citizen, and then there are actually more than the current population, although the distribution of these 9 million spots where they are is far from perfect. Nonetheless, these are some of the steps that nations have tried to make and are making to inform their citizens.
And Solange, this manual is expected to be released over the summer, is that right?
Yeah, we don't know exactly when or how it will be released and distributed, but it is expected to soon be part of French households. Now, this may be a bit anxiety-inducing for some, but keep in mind there are other guides that are normal to French citizens. Take, for example, the Carnet de Santé, or the health book. When you have a child in France, you're given a Carnet de Santé, a health book, at the hospital after the birth, much in the same way that you are given a livret de famille when you get married. This is actually an official document, so it's slightly different. But with the Carnet de Santé, it is filled with advice about how to care for your child, as well as being an aid for doctors to track how they're growing and their medical needs. So the survival guide may just become a bit like that, a source of information that helps everyday citizens for the just-in-case situations.
Great to see that, because I don't have a kid or a ring on the finger, so I don't know.
There you go.
Solange, thank you very much for that. Solange Mougin there.